Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me again this evening. Going to be looking at two different things, but from a different angle. Going to be looking at confidence, what confidence is, what confidence isn't, looking at things like self-confidence. Going to be looking at resilience as well, what resilience is, what it isn't, and again, how we can build and develop these things. Whenever these things are together, it's almost like sometimes it seems as if we're unstoppable. Um, they're useful things to have and just in life in general, I guess, in many different situations. But the reason I'm talking about it tonight is there's a lot of situations where, if you will, life throws us a curveball. Things go wrong, things go bad. Um, Sorry, I'm just going to turn this off because I don't want it making noises and stuff while I'm talking. Um, things go wrong, things go bad. There are people in our path. There are people who exploit, who use, people who will undermine, they will ridicule, they will scorn. Things go wrong for us, our confidence takes a knock. And sometimes our resilience does as well. Sometimes it feels like we're in a situation where we just have to keep on keeping on, and it's almost like an endurance rather than a resilience. And there is a difference between resilience and endurance, which I'll talk about later on as well. But when these things come together, or when these things are happening, what we do is we forget some of our strengths. And I'll give you an example of that. When we look back at something, the things that have happened to us, often we will look at the negative. We will look at the pain. We will look at the regret. We will look at the things that came before or the things that came after. That's often what we focus on. And a lot of the time, that's what we remember. We forget the other stuff. Something may have been painful. It may have been very difficult. We forget we got through it. We might not have got through it well, but we did get through it. We also forget that we could learn from what didn't work. We can learn from what didn't work, so we can rule that out. We can also learn from what does work. We can learn new ways of doing things again, so we're starting to build on our confidence and our skill set and so on. When we're confident, confident is not running about the place like a superhero. Confidence is not being arrogant. Whenever we're confident, we're aware of our skills, we're aware of our experiences, we're aware of our achievements, our character, our qualities. We're aware of all of those things. We can also be aware of areas where we struggle, things that we're not so good at. And I think a good, healthy sign of confidence, self confidence, I think it's the only person in a room full of experts, the only person that puts their hand up and says, I haven't a clue what you're talking about. Explain this in simpler terms. Everybody else smiles and nods because no one wants to look silly. No one wants to look as if they're daft or whatever. I think it's the confident person who has an image of themselves, if you will, that they feel comfortable with. And it's okay to ask. It's okay to say things that they don't know. So with confidence, we can have assertiveness. It can help us with our assertiveness. It gives us a courage, if you will, as well, to maybe face things that are difficult. We can have a balance between a healthy level of self-doubt, not that inner critic that keeps telling us we're no good at anything, but a healthy level of self-doubt, knowing that we don't know everything and we may need to adapt certain things. We can also self-motivate. We have a direction. We know what it is we would like, where we would need to go, where we would like to get to. And we can align our skills in order to get us there. We can also learn new skills or draw on different supports, have the confidence to reach out, to ask people to help us where we're struggling in order to help us where we get. Resilience, as I said, it's not the same as endurance. Sometimes when we endure something, we're just having to go through it. We get worn down very, very easily. It's like it's ongoing, it's non-stop. There's no rest, there's no break. Resilience is different. Resilience, if you will, gives us our ability to keep on going. It's our ability to bounce back, to be able to adapt, to recover from challenges, to be able to navigate different challenges, deal with setbacks and difficult situations, being able to withstand adversity, and to be able to function effectively, if you will, in spite of all of the different things that are going on with us. Whenever these two things combine, the confidence and the resilience, they can help us get us to where we need to be. They can help us deal with those difficult situations. As I said, sometimes our resilience and our confidence takes a bit of a knock. Because I'm mindful so many people that watch my channel have been in difficult situations and difficult relationships, difficult environments. These things kind of get ground down over time. Um, our confidence gets it gets eroded, if you will, and the resilience, it becomes more about endurance. It's more about how we get through each day, and sometimes we even fear and doing anything well, because it's going to be ridiculed, it's going to be scorned, it's going to be, we might upset the other person, their envy, they can't really take it. So we tend to get ground down. When that happens, we forget what I call our inner resources. And this is what I really want to look at drawing on tonight. Our inner resources, the things that we have within us. Yes, we need other help, we need other support. It's good to reach out for it, but that doesn't take away from some of the stuff we have. Now, tonight I'm going to do two different exercises with you. One I'm going to suggest at the end. Go away, do it, see what you think, see what you come up with. It's a useful little way to remind yourself of the things that maybe you didn't think you were aware of. The other one, the first one I'll do at some point this evening. It's a bit of an experiment. It's difficult to do because I'm just talking to a camera. I don't have anyone in front of me. But I would be interested as I do it, just to see what comes up for people, to remind ourselves of some of those strengths that we have that maybe we forget to tap into. We will always tap into the fear. It's always there, it's present, and it will hold us back. It stops us asserting ourselves. It stops us from going in the direction that maybe we need to go. It stops us from maybe doing the things that might be in our own best interest. That anxiety, that stress, the fear of the consequences and so on. When we're doing that, we're forgetting the other stuff. And I'm going to do a little exercise with you to help you to tap into that. So as I say, please be patient with me. I'm going to talk you through it. I'm going to have to rely on comments as they come up to see if anyone's found it helpful. But whenever the resilience and the confidence is combined, get back to this. We're looking at adaptability. We're looking at emotional regulation. We're looking at tapping into our problem solving skills. Now, previous live streams, I looked at problem solving, solution focused problems, recognizing our triggers, different things like that. You might, if you haven't seen them, go ahead and look at them. If not, you might want to refresh yourself. But helping us with our problem solving skills, because it's not always a question of what's the quickest way out of this, or what's the easiest way out of this, or what's the most expedient route out of this. Sometimes it's what's in my longer term best interest. If we're thinking of the quickest and easiest way out, it's sometimes we're forgetting those strengths and qualities, our ability to endure, our resilience. We're forgetting our confidence, and we're forgetting our support network. We're forgetting all of those different things. We're just thinking what takes the feeling away. So good emotional regulation, good problem solving skills, being not just tapping into your social support network, but sometimes what can help is actually being part of someone else's support network. I think there's something quite empowering whenever we have a skill, we have an ability that we can help someone else with, when we can listen to other people with their problems. We're not necessarily giving them advice, we're not necessarily telling them what to do, but we can maybe share our experiences, what's been useful, what's been helpful. There is something quite empowering in that when we are able to help other people as well. So it's not just becoming maybe part of a support network, or utilizing your support network rather, it's becoming maybe part of someone else's support network. When combined as well, they can also give us a persistence. We're not necessarily going to give up easily. Every time an obstacle comes up, or every time we fear someone's reaction or whatever it is, we're not necessarily going to back down. We're not necessarily going to retreat. We might, but maybe only for a moment, as we think about what the best way to navigate it is. It's not like we're just going to surrender, give in. So we can keep on going. We can navigate our obstacles and our setbacks and things like that. We can also become a bit more resourceful. Again, whenever we tap into our inner resources, we look at what we have, we look at what we can do, we can be creative, We can be a bit more optimistic. We can utilize the people around us, the people that care about us. We can utilize all the resources, the things you find online, friends, different kind of support groups, whatever it is. Even if there's something we need, some kind of specific advice, we might have the confidence to maybe talk to the right kind of people to be able to give us the advice we need. So we can be, as I say, a bit more motivated, a bit more resourceful. We can also become a bit more flexible. So as I say, even if we try something once and it works, that's not to say it's going to work the next time, but we can take the same principle. Again, this is one of our inner resources, our experience. We can take the same principle and we can be flexible. We can maybe adapt it. It might be a different language, a different kind of wording. It might be a different approach, whatever. But we can be a bit more flexible and adaptable into our approaches. But resilience and confidence, among other things, it's like anything else, they develop over time. They're not something we can just push a button and say all of a sudden, now I'm incredibly brave, I'm incredibly heroic, or I'm incredibly clever, or I'm whatever. There are things that we have to develop, build on. And whenever we're trying, whenever we're building, one of the things that can set us back is when we fail. But there's an author of a really, really good book I sometimes suggest to people. It's just called How to Stand Up for Yourself. And one of the things he says in his book about the fear of failing, the fear of things going badly, he reassures the reader that of course it's going to go wrong. Sometimes it's supposed to go wrong. We never learn anything unless we fail at something. And even if we do fail, it doesn't necessarily mean everything's lost. It just means we've either learned something that doesn't work, or we maybe are about 10-20% further on than we were. Maybe 10 or 20% is better than nothing at all. So it's going to be like little incremental steps. Building confidence, resilience is the same. Small, little incremental steps. Now, caught my eye. I try not to read the comments as I'm talking because I get distracted, but it did catch my eye a moment ago. Someone saying about talking, being afraid. There's nothing wrong with being afraid. Fear is a perfectly normal feeling. Sometimes our fear might be out of proportion, but this is what I mean by small incremental steps. When we're honest with ourselves about what we're afraid of, we could be afraid of consequences. We could be afraid of rejection. We could be afraid of someone else's reactions. There's a lot of different things we can fear. And sometimes that fear is quite justified. It's not for me or anyone else to say it isn't. No one has the right to say that. Only you can discern that. But when we are honest with ourselves about what it is we're afraid of, and this is an age-old therapeutic concept, it doesn't matter what the approach is. Pretty much every therapist in the world will, talk you through this kind of thing. When we understand what we're afraid of and we expose ourselves to that fear in very small, safe little doses, one little piece at a time, voluntarily, of our own accord, and we pay attention, what happens is over time, the fear doesn't necessarily go away, but what happens is it starts to dilute. It's not as intense, it's not as strong. So in other words, we start to grow in confidence. Our comfort zone starts to widen. Our distress for tolerance starts to increase instead of decrease. It starts to increase. We start to become a bit more courageous, a bit more confident. How you go about that, it's really up to yourself. If you have the help of a mental health professional, whatever, they can talk through exercise and so on. But I always say to people, it's in small, safe little steps that we do it. For instance, if you don't like deep water, do not jump into the middle of the Atlantic just to see what it's like. That's not going to help you or anybody. So it's small, little steps. You expose yourself to it a little tiny piece at a time. Over time, whether that's an afternoon, whether that's a year, doesn't matter what it is, the more you pay attention, you start to notice the fear dilutes. It doesn't go away, but it dilutes. And it dilutes because you start to become a bit more confident. Confidence is not the absence of fear. Confidence is sometimes understanding the fear, but still knowing what it is you need to do and what might make it just a little bit easier. So, developed over time. Resilience is the same. It's developed over time. We learn what works and we learn what doesn't. Sometimes resilience is maybe our self-care. Sometimes it's the things we have to do to rest. Sometimes it's having to say no. Sometimes it's, you know, it's doing things in our own best interest. It's being able to recharge so that we can go back to do whatever it is we need to do. When we do feel worn down, as I said a moment ago, because I want to get onto this and I want to try this with you to see what you think. When we do feel worn down, it's like our confidence has been eroded. Sometimes we're so tired, our resilience can feel as if it's gone. It is about endurance. It's like we're functioning, we're existing, we're not really living. We might have an idea that the situation we're in is not a healthy one. Maybe we need to be in a better one. Maybe we need to be in a different one. Maybe we're even out of a situation, but the after effect is still there. We're still cautious. We're still hyper vigilant. There's still a lot of anxiety. There's still a lot of stress. There's a lot of uncertainty around the future. So I'm going to ask you to think for a moment. Now, this is going to take a moment or so of your time. This is why I say I'm struggling with this, because I've never done. I'm talking to a camera, for goodness sake. The best way I could describe this is how we always look at the negative or the funny or the whatever it was. We don't actually look at what it was. And the example I always use is a training course I went at, CPD event a lot of years ago. And the woman taking the class asked for a volunteer to talk about their first kiss, to describe their first kiss. Now, the guy that was sitting beside me, he volunteered, and so she asked him to describe your first kiss. And the first thing he did, he burst out laughing, and everybody else burst out laughing as well. And she asked, "What's so funny?" And he responded, "She dumped me for my mate." Now, that was a funny thing. Everybody laughed. But then she said to him, "That wasn't what I asked. I didn't ask what happened. I didn't ask what happened afterwards. I asked you to describe it." The point she was making was, when something happens, we always look at what came before. We look at what it cost us. We look at the stress. We look at the strain. We look at the difficulty. We look at the effort. We look at the sacrifice. Then we look at what happened afterwards. We will look at regret. We will look at the cost. We will look at all of the other things. We don't actually think of the moment. Now, I suppose a better example would have been a driving test. It's like passing your test and passing your driving test. We look at how many lessons it took us, how much money it cost, how many times we had to do the test because we kept failing until we passed it. Then afterwards, we're going to look at how much it cost for car insurance. The fact that Dad wouldn't let us borrow the car. All our friends had cars. We're going to look at all of that. Then when we did get a car, it cost us a fortune, you know. If you were to look at just that moment when the examiner says, "Congratulations, you passed your test," not what happened before, not what happened afterwards. When we just go into a moment, and I just like using the word awesome because it covers everything. There have been times in our lives when we have been awesome, okay? There have been times in your life when you have been the smartest person in the room. You've been the bravest person in the room. You've been the sexiest person in the room, you know. You've been the funniest person in the room. There's times when we have achieved, we have accomplished, we have overcome. There are times when we have just been absolutely awesome. I just like that because it covers everything. There have been times in your life when you're awesome. So I'm just going to ask you all to take just a moment, okay? We don't need to light candles, take our shoes off, but I just need you to just ask you to think for a moment of just one moment in your life. Could be a recent one, could have been when you were younger, whatever. Just one moment when you were absolutely awesome, okay? And just hang out there. And the important thing is you don't think about what happened before, you don't think about what happened afterwards. You just think of that moment when someone said, "Congratulations, you've got the job," or "Congratulations, you passed the test," or whatever it was. Just think about that. Just take a moment to think about that. Just hang out there for a second, just in that moment, okay? Now we're going to be silent for a second or two as I ask everyone to do this. As you're remembering that moment when you were awesome, don't force anything. Just pay attention to anything different that you might be beginning to feel physically. And as I'm doing this, I'm going to keep a quick eye on this just to see if anybody's noticing anything. Remember the moment you were awesome. You overcame. You accomplished. You won. Whatever the term, whatever it is. Don't force anything, but just notice anything different you begin to feel physically, even emotionally. I feel like I am glowing. Joy. That's a good start. Do you know, I was really frightened of this happening because I didn't know how this was going to work. I can't stick with the moment. Needed to leave my church, crying a little. Yeah, as I say, we think of what happened before, what happened afterwards. Sometimes situations may have been very difficult, and there could have been great consequences. But whenever we think of just a moment, and it doesn't have to be any, you don't have to find a cure for something uncurable. You don't have to save the world. It doesn't have to be anything huge, massive. There's no one judging it. The only person who's thinking about it is you. When you get a sense of that moment when you felt awesome, you pay attention to what you're feeling physically. For a lot of people, it's different. It might be joy. It might be relaxed. It might be, some people feel a little lighter. The weight on their shoulders is suddenly lifted. Sometimes the knots in your stomach start to loosen. There's no right, there's no wrong. But you notice the difference, because when we're doing that, we're not just remembering what happened, we're also remembering how it felt, because this is what also happens with things like stress, anxiety, fear, trauma, all of those things. We remember how those things felt physically as well. And often when we're trying to avoid difficult situations, it's because we're trying to avoid how they felt. When we remember some of those times when we were confident, we were awesome, we were glowing, we were whatever it was, we start to feel a little different physically as well. And sometimes that could give you the energy you need to face whatever it is you're about to feel. We all have these inner resources. Every single one of us has overcome and accomplished at some point. We've all had difficult experiences, difficult relationships, difficult moments in our lives, but we have also had moments. As I said, we've had moments you were the bravest person in the room. Everyone else was falling apart. You were the one holding it together. Every single one of us have something that we can tap into. More than one thing, but sometimes just one's enough. That might give you the energy you need to face whatever it is you're about to face. That could give you the energy you need to maybe talk to that person in work. It could give you the energy you need to maybe say no to someone. It could give you the energy you need to focus on where you need to be, where you would like to be, what you have to be. These resources, as I say, they're all within us. Every single one of us. When you tap into them, that's you beginning to utilize them, because you don't just remember the fear, you don't remember the pain, you also remember the encouragement. You also remember the support. You also remember the courage. You remember all of the things that come up with that. The shifting of the knots in the stomach, maybe, or the weight on the shoulders, as I say, that can sometimes give you the energy you need to do whatever it is you're just about to do. You go into that situation with all the energy, the pent up energy, the knots in the stomach, the shaking and all the other stuff that comes up with this physically. Sometimes it can be a bit more difficult. Now, I'm not saying the situation is going to be easy, but it might become easier. That's the important thing, easier. So, be interesting. I will come back and I'm going to read more of the comments, not because I'm very interested, I'm very curious to see, who found that helpful, if there's anything it's something you might want to continue with. But looking at ways to help build our confidence and our resilience, these are just ideas. Okay, you can come up with your own. You can challenge mine. You can come up with your own. It's not a one size fits all. I think, first of all, when we find a version of ourselves that we feel comfortable with, not necessarily a version of ourselves that we think is going to be accepted by everyone else. Yes, there is maybe a bit of a need for that, but also the version of us that we feel comfortable with. For instance, we don't necessarily like the thought of failing. Nobody likes to fail. But the truth is, everybody fails. And failing does not make you a failure any more than going to a garage makes you a car. Okay. But we find a version of ourselves, someone who, I have skills, I have qualities, I have abilities. I also have things over here that I'm not proud of. I have regrets. I have things that I wish I'd done differently. It's just trying to get that balance. You have the version of yourself that you feel comfortable with. You develop as well, if you will, a growth mindset, because a lot of times, especially if we're stuck and things are happening around us, and people have tried to keep us stuck. A lot of people, as I say, people that watch my channel, they've maybe been in situations or relationships with someone who just wanted them to look at the floor, aim for their feet. Don't lift your head. Just you stay where you are. I prefer you where you are. That can be difficult to come out of, especially if it was a long-term thing, because we can sometimes feel a bit brainwashed. Developing a growth mindset. Now, a growth mindset does not necessarily mean that we're going to suddenly shoot up like Jack's beanstalk or something. No, it's going to be, as I said earlier on, it's going to be a process. The growth mindset is when we find that direction we might like to be, that direction we would like to go in. We know there are difficulties ahead. We know there are challenges, but we understand that, yeah, if I get it wrong, I will have learned something. I will just learn a different way of doing it, or I might have to change direction slightly. That's what I said about earlier on about becoming adaptable and being a bit more flexible. We have that growth mindset. We are not trying to complete a sprint. We're not trying to cross a finish line in some mad dash. We're not trying to get there at warp speed. What we're trying to do is we're recognizing it's going to be a journey, okay? Because life's a journey anyway. We don't suddenly get to a point and think this is it now. We always develop, we always grow. Coming out of difficult situations, abusive situations, things like that. It's a journey, because life is a journey. So it's going to be a piece at a time, and our experiences that we learn along the way can help us. The goals that we do set as well to help with our confidence is to make our goals a bit more realistic. There's nothing wrong with having aspirations, nothing wrong with having ideals, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But in order to get to them, sometimes we need to set smaller, realistic goals. For instance, you want to get fit. Well, how fit do you want to get? Do you want to get fit that you can run up and down the stairs in 2 bounds, or do you want to get fit that you can run a marathon? Pardon me. So you make it measurable. And if it is about running a marathon, you're probably not going to be able to do that by tomorrow lunchtime. So that might mean having to go out jogging or whatever twice a week. You're going to have to build up strength in your legs and so on. You're going to have to get fitter. You're going to have to cut out certain foods, stop smoking and drinking, whatever it is. That your goals are going to have to be realistic, and each and every little smaller goal that you tick off, that's you further along the road, if you will. It's ticked off your to-do list. You're a bit further. The little small tiny goals can help increase your confidence. Sometimes if you're in a negative environment, we ignore the small goals. Sometimes we will just see them as a relief that they didn't feel, but we don't pay attention to them as actual achievements. No, each and every one is an achievement. Today I learned that maybe I can say no. Today I learned how to use whatever. I learned how to do something different, something better. Each and every little step is a positive step. And even if, as I say, if it's about changing direction, you were heading for something, you decided maybe that's not for me, I want to try that instead, you haven't lost anything. It's perfectly okay to do that. You've still ticked off goals along the way. You now have a new direction. You now have new goals. As I said earlier on, the person that had mentioned about the fear, sometimes it is about facing your fears. But as I say, in small, measurable ways. When we do expose ourselves to the things that we feel uncomfortable with, as I say, we can become a bit more confident, we become a bit more courageous. It takes us out of our comfort zone, and when that happens, our comfort zone widens and our distress for tolerance, our tolerance for distress rather, starts to increase. We start to become maybe a little bit more courageous. We recognize we can handle more than we thought we could. The fears don't necessarily go away, but they certainly dilute. Sometimes they will go away because we realize that, you know, it's like the Wizard of Oz. He's not a mad, crazy wizard. He's not all powerful. He's just an old guy like me behind a curtain pulling levers. You know, that's all it is. So that you realize there's nothing to be afraid of. Other times your fear can inform you. This is the thing about fear. Fear can be a very powerful deterrent to things, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes there are things we really do need to be afraid of. It just, we can be a bit more cautious, okay? And to paraphrase my favorite Time Lord, what was it he said about fear? Yeah, fear can do one of two things. First of all, it can either give you the strength to run faster than you've ever had to run, or it can give you the energy to fight harder than you've ever had to fight, okay? So it's how we use our fear, I guess, depending on the situation, of course. But when we do face down the things that we feel uncomfortable with, we recognize a lot of the time it's more the fear, that it's the feeling that we fear, not necessarily the thing itself. That difficult conversation, we feared having the conversation because we feared the other person's reaction. We feared how we would feel about their reaction. We don't want them to fold their arms, stick their lip out. We don't want them to throw a hissy fit. Now, if it's someone who's going to be very violent, then yes, we're probably very right to be afraid. That's completely different. We fear their rejection. When we realize it's the feeling that we fear, not necessarily the thing itself, they can reject us. We might not like that. There's a other part of us that might recognize maybe we're better off. Is it the kind of person I would want to be accepted by anyway? We learn from our failures. We learn from the things that don't work every bit as much as what does work. When we learn from the things that didn't work, even the things in the past that we might have regretted, we said yes when every part of us was kicking inside saying you should be saying no. We turned left when we know we should have turned right. Whatever it was, we will hold on to those regrets. Sometimes we beat ourselves up about them. But if we learn from them, maybe stop judging ourselves so harshly. This is the thing about judging ourselves. I often think that when we look back at ourselves in the past, we're judging ourselves through the eyes of the person we are today, with today's wisdom, today's experience. That person back there didn't have that. But yet we're judging them as if they should have had, as if they were clairvoyant or something. No, we can be a bit kinder to ourselves. We can practice a bit of self-compassion. I think a good way of practicing self-compassion is to treat yourself as if you're someone you care about. Talk to yourself as if you're someone you want to be nice to, as if you're someone you really care about. Do you ever notice if you were to talk to other people the way you talk to yourself, you probably wouldn't have many friends? So just treat yourself as if you would treat your best friend. A little bit of self-compassion, a little bit of patience with yourself. When you hear that, and I think I talked about this in the previous live stream as well, when we're looking at that inner critic, a lot of the time that inner critic, it's not really our voice, it's someone else's. We challenge that inner critic. It's not that we don't hear it, we just maybe choose not to listen to it. Healthy self-doubt is different. The inner critic is something that will always tell us we're no good. It's not going to work, we're going to fail. So we practice a little bit of self-compassion. We learn from our mistakes because, as I say, we learn what to avoid in the future. When we're doing that, we can have a bit more positive self-talk. It's not that it's not that we're being arrogant, but a little bit of positive self-talk can help us challenge our negative thinking habits. And we all have thinking habits in some degree. Some of them are, I would more call them unhelpful, like we catastrophize. we mind read, we predict the future, we will label, we will emotionally reason. We can challenge some of those thinking habits, especially when we look at our problem solving skills, as we talked about earlier. What are my options? What are my choices? What are my resources? What did I do last time? What worked and what didn't? What could I try differently this time? Even looking at other people, how do they handle certain situations? Is there anything I could learn there if I just watch them closely? Having a good supportive network as well, having a network around you. That's why I think things like support groups can be helpful, online forums, things like that. People who can validate you, people who will care for you. If you have friends or family, people that you mix with, people who can bring out the best in you, people who aren't afraid to call you out if you're getting it wrong, but not necessarily in a bad way. They're not being caustic. They're not being horrible. Also, you being a part of someone else's support network, as I said, there's something very empowering about that. That can help with our confidence as well. Because the thing about other people is, do you ever notice when it comes to other people, you can be very kind, you can be very compassionate, you can be very patient, you can have a lot of empathy. You can even be very creative, coming up with suggestions. When you're doing that with other people, maybe you should listen to yourself, because a lot of the times the advice we give other people is advice we maybe need to listen to ourselves. Looking at different ways to practice grounding, mindfulness, stress management, lots of different things. That little exercise I did a moment ago, I would just put that under the umbrella term of paying attention. When we pay attention, okay, we can pay attention to the moment. We can pay attention to past experiences. We can pay attention to sensations that we're having. Little things like that, again, can help with our resilience. That little exercise could give you the boost of energy you need to get through, as I say, what it is you maybe need to do. Having a healthier lifestyle can help. Now, we all like our treats, we all like we give a lot away here. We all like the occasional cigar, maybe the odd single malt. But a healthier lifestyle, looking after ourselves, trying to improve our sleep patterns, our rest, our diet, things like that. These things can help as well. They can help with our mindset. Pay attention to our adaptability, because we are also more adaptable and flexible than we give ourselves credit for. As I said, you may try something and it didn't work, but if you pay attention, you may have tried the same thing, but you changed something in a different situation and that worked. When you think of your adaptability, you're looking at what you do so well in one area, something you excel at, or something you feel comfortable with, or something you're good at, whatever term you want to use. You pay attention to that, but you also look at areas where you might struggle, areas that you're not so good. So you might take what comes from here. What is it I'm doing here that might compensate for this, that might actually help me with this? Again, you're drawing on your inner resources, and you're being a bit more adaptable, a bit more flexible, a bit more creative. Okay. Celebrate your small wins. As I said earlier on, the small wins, a small victory doesn't have to be anything massive. You do not have to win the war. You do not have to get world peace. You do not have to save the planet and everybody on it. No, just a little small win. That could be anything. I can't tell you what that is. You know what a small win is. For someone who maybe struggles with motivation, procrastination, things like that, one small win is when they take one small step towards what they have to do. Pay attention to that. Acknowledge that. Not the effort that went into it, but the feeling that came from it. You celebrate those small wins. You look at your continuous learning as well, because we learn every single day. And this is what I mean about life being a journey, is recovery being a journey, and so on. We learn something new every day. We get new information every day. We don't have to remember everything, and all the information we get, we might not necessarily agree with. It might not even be anything we find particularly helpful, but we pay attention to it anyway. If you will, we're broadening our horizon. We're also learning that ability to, if you will, negotiate internally. Do I accept it or do I not? We don't necessarily have to take everything at face value, but nor do we have to reject everything at face value. We can learn to negotiate internally. I said 2 exercises. Actually, I was wrong. It's 3. So here's the second one I'm going to ask you to do. When you think of perhaps where you would like to be, let's say a year from today, it could be 5 years today, 10 years today, whatever it is, but you imagine yourself at some point in the future. You think of where it is you would like to be, how you would imagine life to be. When we think like that, if you will, we're being aspirational. And I think that's a good place to start, by the way. We get an idea. When we're talking about it, we will say things like, I'd like this. I'd like to be able to that. I'd like to be able to do the other. And if I had this, it would be wonderful. And if I could do that. And again, that's a good place to start when we think aspirationally. But if you were to think about where you would like to be, how you would like things to be, maybe you would like a better job, maybe you would like a partner, maybe you would like your own place, maybe you would like, different environment, whatever. You think of where you would like to be and how you would imagine life to be. Now, it's going to sound a bit strange. If you're doing it in company, you might make them aware of what it is you're doing, ask them to do the same thing. You can even do it yourself. Do it in the bathroom mirror. As long as your bathroom is private, no one's watching. Talk as if you already have it. Now, I'll give you an example. Let's imagine I wanted a job. I want a better job. I want, maybe it pays more money. It's going to challenge me a lot more. It's a promotion, whatever. Let's imagine. Now, instead of saying, well, I would like this because I'm capable of this and I could do that and everything. So I used to say, okay, this is like a year in the future, and I'm talking about it as if I have it. Well, I applied for the job. The interview was difficult, but I got through it. I answered all the questions confidently. They saw something in me that they thought was worth hiring. They thought I could bring value to it. I've been in the job, 10 months now, and in 10 months, I've made a new support group of friends, network of friends. I feel respected. The money's good. It's really helped me out. It's paid off a lot of the stuff that I owed. My standard of life has improved. The social aspect of work has improved as well, because now I get to go out. There's other people there that would ask me out on Friday after work. We all go and we all socialize. Be put in for training. So I'm now learning how to do this, and I'm looking forward to. Now, that sounds crazy, I know. But the point I'm making is, just like the exercise earlier, you tap into something that you already have done. You tap into, that moment when you were awesome, and you draw on that feeling. When you're thinking of your future self, if you were to talk about it as if it's already happened, as if you already have these things, again, you pay attention to the difference. Again, sometimes we might sit up a little bit straighter. Sometimes we might sound a little bit clearer. Sometimes, again, it might give us the energy we need. Now, when you've done that, again, you jump into your time machine, you come back into the present. You think about what it felt like to have those things. So the human imagination is a wonderful thing. You think about what it felt like when you imagined having those things. That could give you the energy you need. What is it I need to do right now in order to get me there? Okay, that might mean having to look for other jobs. That might mean having to update my CV that I have been procrastinating over for the past 6 months. That might mean having to do this. You get a sense of what it is you need, and you're drawing on your skills that you already have. Your confidence has maybe just went up a notch or two. You might not have what it is you were looking for within that year, but you could well be on the path towards it. So you visualize the success, you visualize what it would feel like, you imagine what it would be like, and then you just come back into the present and think about what it is you need in order to get there. Okay. All of this starts, though, by just taking some kind of action. Now, what that action is entirely up to you. A small step. Remember, procrastination is one of those things that can hold us back with all the best will and work. Procrastination and avoidance is different. They're two different things. Avoidance is, it's not in my best interest. I'd best get out of this. This is going to be painful. Procrastination is, this is in my best interest, but I won't do it now. I'll do it later. I'll do it when I feel a bit better. I'll do it when I have the confidence. I'll do it when all the ducks are in a row. I'll do it whenever. We just keep putting it off. So procrastination can erode the confidence. It can erode those good intentions. Even whenever we do one of those exercises and we feel a bit of energy, the procrastination tells us, well, you're feeling good right now, so you don't have to do it. It's a very easy habit to fall into, and it does take a bit of effort to get out of, but it can be worth it. The last thing I was going to talk about is the last exercise. If you took just a piece of paper and you wrote down 10 things, just 10 things about yourself, 10 things about yourself. Again, I love this expression. 10 things that make you sparkle and shine. Okay? Just 10 things about you. They could be things that you've achieved. They could be things that you're good at. They could be things that you've overcome, things that you've accomplished, things you enjoy. There's no right, there is no wrong. And no one has to read the list, only you. So who's gonna tell you you're wrong? It's your list. You write down 10 things about yourself. Okay? And as I say, you're proud of, you feel good about, you've accomplished, you overcame, whatever it was, even just things you feel good doing, things you enjoy. You write down those 10 things, and then you go through the 10 things. Why do they feel good? What was good about them? What did you enjoy about them? Again, you're not thinking about what happened first. You're not thinking about what happened afterwards. You're not, as we often do, we're not trying to discredit ourselves. For example, if I was to ask, well, what do you like doing? You might say, well, I like playing the piano. Before I even get to say anything, you'll say, but I'm not very good at it. Well, you don't have to be good at it. No one asked how good you were. No one, there's no judgment on how good you are. Who do you play it for? You just play it for yourself. So you think about those things without the discredit in it, without the trying to devalue it. Remember, other people probably do that, which is why we don't pay attention. Which is why we don't pay attention to these things. So you look at those 10 things, but then you write a second list. And you write down on that second list 10 things you would like to be good at, 10 things you would like to accomplish, 10 things you would like to be proud of, 10 things you would like to overcome, whatever. Okay? And then you look at the two lists. And as you're looking through the second list, you keep looking at the first one as well. Go back and keep looking at the first one as you're going through it. What are you doing in the first list already? Because a lot of the stuff on the second list, we're already doing. We already have the qualities. It's already there. For instance, one of the things on the first list could be, I passed my driving test. That's the example from earlier. Passed my driving test. On the second list, there could be things like, I would like to learn how to, a new skill in order to get a job. Okay, that's going to take time. That's going to take money. That's going to take a bit of sacrifice. That's going to take maybe a night class. That's going to take whatever. You look at the first list. Is that not what was involved when you were doing your driving test? Did you not have to face the embarrassment of stalling the car and, sitting at a junction for 3/4 of an hour, afraid to pull out? You overcame that. It took you a while and you failed a few times maybe, but eventually you stuck at it and you passed your test. Doesn't matter whether it was the first time, doesn't matter it was the fifth. I'm not going to tell anybody how many times it took me, okay? But I stuck at it. When you look at what you would like to do in the second list, what you would like to improve, what is it you've already got? What is it you're already doing? The second list, I would like to be a bit more assertive. You go back to the first list and you might find, well, I'm actually quite good at this and I'm quite, well, okay, so if someone challenged you about that, would you have the assertiveness to say, well, actually, no, you're quite wrong. I know quite a bit about that. That's being assertive. That's not being rude. That's not being cheeky. That's not being anything like that. It's just maybe standing your ground. A lot of the times we already have the skills. Now, sometimes they may need to be adapted, they may need to be finely tuned. Sometimes we may need to learn new things. We may need to learn how to do things differently. It's a difference. I always think a life coach can correct me on this. The difference between counseling and life coaching is things like life coaching can teach that sort of thing. Sometimes there's a little bit of coaching might be involved in counseling, but it's something completely different. Sometimes we may have to learn new things, and even if that's the case, you go back to the first list. Well, I had to go to a driving instructor and already done. What can we draw on? These resources are in us. Sometimes we forget them. Sometimes they become buried. Sometimes other people ridicule them, they scorn them, so we forget them. We don't think they're that important. Well, they are. Okay, they're there and they're yours. They're free. Tap into them anytime you want. So I have waffled on for long enough. I'm going to have a look at some of the comments and questions and see. Let me see. And go back to the beginning. Everybody says hello at the beginning. Hello, everybody. Hello, Record Hound. Okay. It's okay to be afraid, I think. Yeah, it is. Absolutely. As I said, all our feelings, I believe, are the most honest things about us. That being said, they are not always an accurate reflection of what's really happening, but they are still honest and they are worth listening to and paying attention to. Sometimes they might be out of proportion. Sometimes they might be dysregulated. There could be any number of things going on, but the feelings are still important. If we fear the feelings are going to make decisions for us. Whenever we feel something uncomfortable, we're just thinking, get me out of this. What's the best way to avoid this? When we pay attention to what we're really feeling, it could be uncertain. It could be, I feel unconfident. It could be, I feel a lack of control. It could be, I feel threatened. There could be any number of things. But when we pay attention to what it is we're really feeling, that can inform our course of action, not make the decision for us. It is okay to be afraid. There are some things perfectly okay to be afraid of. This scares me, okay? I'm not a natural presenter. I said this the last time. I can talk to people. I can't talk to a screen. I just see me here, okay? Here, going through therapy made tons of change. Yeah. Have answers for someone else that I've questioned myself. Record Hound again. Yeah, Record Hound, that's was said earlier on. Sometimes there is something very empowering about whenever we are able to share with others. One of the things I say in some of the videos I do, depending on the subject, if anybody found anything helpful and if they feel comfortable to do so, share it in the comment box, because someone else reading it might benefit from it. Not only, when I say that, it's not only because someone might benefit from it, they might appreciate it, but the person putting it might actually get something from it as well. We are social creatures after all. Found a safe friend, support each other. Good to know. Caution sounds better. It's helpful. Fear is irrational. It can be irrational. It depends on what the subject is. Or rather, it depends on what it is we're afraid of. Fear, I think, can keep us on our toes. And depending on what it is we're afraid of, is, like I said, my favorite Doctor Who paraphrase. I can't remember the exact quote. It's something along the lines of, fear can give you the energy to run faster than you've ever had to run in your life, or the strength to fight harder than you've ever had to fight, because sometimes we have to fight because we are afraid, every bit as much as we have to run. Okay. If at first you don't succeed, don't go skydiving. Okay. There's always an exception. Yeah, okay. I'm trying to find when I was doing the exercise. Let's see a bit of feedback. Did anyone find that helpful? We don't face and process our emotions. We avoid. They remain blocked in our bodies. They can. There is something about whenever we talk about being triggered, a trigger is an external thing that brings up an emotional memory. We remember how something felt. We remember the fear. We remember the anxiety. We remember the pain. We remember what people forget is we can also be triggered in other ways. We can be triggered in ways that are incredibly exciting. We can be triggered in ways where we just burst out laughing, something that really makes us laugh. We can be triggered in so many different ways. But what the trigger is an external thing. It's a sensory thing, sight, sound, touch, smell, that sort of thing. Somebody says something, we see something, whatever it is, and that brings up the emotional memory. That is what's triggered the emotional memory. If we're not regulating it, if we don't understand it, we can, depending on what it is, we might just jump straight into survival mode, or if we understand it, again, it can inform us. It's familiar. It seems familiar. It doesn't necessarily mean that the previous, yesterday's situation, whatever, is present today. It just feels the same, which means that gives me a choice on how to respond. You couldn't stick with the moment. Today's a really great day. I saw your comment earlier. You can't stick with the moment. It is something to practice. It's like everything. It's something to practice. Now, if you don't find it helpful, don't do it. Don't be pushing it. It's like anything else. Don't be pushing it. But if you're patient and you give yourself, and even finding a different moment, even finding a different situation, that moment where we were awesome, you find that and you just hang out there for a moment. Not what happened before, not what happened afterwards, just that moment. Sometimes, as I say, that might give you the energy you need to do what it is you need to do, or you're about to do, or even to find your way through whatever it is you're trying to do. Dancing in the kitchen the other day, relaxing. I have been known to boogie in the kitchen once in a while myself. No one in the house. I put on a little bit of REM. I share far too much in this thing. I smiled. I have a nice memory. Yeah, sometimes we have a smile, just a wry smile, something that no one else would get. I think there's something really powerful about that. Sometimes I just have a wry smile, or I start laughing at something and people are asking, what is it? Something I couldn't share. Yeah, remember the shock, humiliation, rejection, and disbelief 5 years ago. It's good to think of a happy memory. Not just thinking of the happy memory, but it's tapping into the happy memory, remembering how the happy memory felt. It doesn't take away from what happened. You're not ignoring it. It's none of those things. It's not trying to avoid anything. It's you're remembering those resources you have. That's still there, but you also have this, and this is what you're focusing on right now. Helpful exercise. Thank you. I'm glad you found that helpful, Yvette. I can't describe how it feels. Feel really disconnected. Mom just got through my no contact choice. That can be a difficult. Someone had mentioned the no contact, and I'll be honest, it's something I have been putting off because no contact is a very difficult subject to cover because it's something not just looking at what to do and how to do. It's the impact it can have. That it's a very difficult thing to talk about. Looking at ideas and what people find helpful is one thing, but it's also talking about the reality of it, because going no contact with someone, especially a family member, can bring up a huge disconnect. It really can, and it's something that's very difficult to work through. Even if it is in someone's best interest, it doesn't stop it hurting. It is something, now that I've mentioned it out loud and everyone's heard me, it is something I will cover. I've been asked for it. I've been sitting on it actually for about a year and a half. The reason I haven't covered is because it is such a difficult, touchy subject. It's all right if the person, it's not someone we could care less about. We just don't want to see them again. But whenever it's someone that was very, very close to us, whether that was a partner, a family member, whatever, that can bring up a lot of things. There's a lot of loss. I will cover it. I'll cover it in the video. Let me see. All right. Mine was betrayal trauma. Someone had asked previously this about dealing with betrayal trauma. Again, that's something I might actually do on a live stream. It's not something I could really incorporate into this. I did talk about betrayal trauma on a video, talking about how to deal with it. Again, there's never a one size fits all. Everybody's different, but I could look at some ways. I might put it out in a video. I think a live stream might be easier because it just comes to my head. It's a lot easier. I will cover about betrayal trauma. Betrayal trauma is a very difficult thing. It's not just that someone's let us down, someone's disappointed us. It's the person that we were supposed to trust, the person who was supposed to have our back, the person we believed in. You know, it's when the betrayal comes there. That's when it's so hard. Again, just like the going no contact. That's what brings up in us is this huge kind of loss. It's like the world is never the same again, or at least it can feel as if it's never the same again. It won't matter, we'll gossip. Yep. I always say you're always going to be somebody's villain. You know, some people aren't going to like you because you had a bad day. Some people aren't going to like you because you had a good day. Just people in the world like that. It's the expression. I would like to say it's a modern expression, but you know, somebody told me it isn't. It's probably about 20 years old by now. Haters, they're going to hate. Yeah, some people are just like that. I get most online of one friend I trust and they're honest with. It's good to have someone. Yeah, it's good to have someone that feeling a part of something, feeling listened to, feeling validated. Some of these things I type I reread because I need to. Yeah, absolutely. I try to put subtitles in my videos because I know that not everybody understands my accent. The thought of me trying to put subtitles on an hour-long video, my poor wee fingers would be sore. I will try and find a way of doing something. I know there are subtitles come up, but I don't think the subtitle generator understands my accent. I introduce myself as Darren Magee or something like that whenever the subtitles come up. But I will try to do something about that. I like the odd whiskey. It's a special treat once in a while. Just a special treat. A nice fine single malt. Let me see. Sleep as much as we can. Yeah. Saying our own words answers our own questions. Yeah, sometimes it does. Before you procrastinate, stop and think about it first. Backward hand, you come up with the funniest things, like you really do. Okay, laughing record, 1921. That's how can you? Okay, so we're in Scotland, am I? I'm not in Scotland. People think I'm Scotland. The one person thought I was American. I don't sound anything like an American, unless America has a strange little corner of it somewhere. I'm not from Scotland. I'm from Northern Ireland, the northern part of Ireland. So there is kind of like a mix of Scottish and Irish. The accent in the north, I think, is like a mixture, I'm guessing. I think it's a mixture of Irish and Scottish, which is why sometimes it gets confused. Procrastination, the best thing I never did. Listen, everybody, come to an end. There are just some ideas about confidence and resilience, but being able to draw on them from your own inner resources, which we all have. We all have our experiences, but we also have our imagination. If we use our imagination constructively, sometimes, especially when we're panicking and we're anxious, it's like we're chasing our imagination. It's creating the worst case scenario. If it works, if we use it to work for us, we can create a situation where we see ourselves handling something. Doesn't mean we do it painlessly. It doesn't mean everything works out perfectly, but we imagine ourselves coming through it. You imagine ourselves maybe that year from now, that 5 years from now, and we have what it is we feel we're lacking now. We imagine what it would feel like whenever we're talking about it, as if it's in the here and now. We start to maybe feel a little differently. When we bring ourselves back into the present, it's not that we're daydreaming anymore. We now have the energy and the motivation to do whatever it is we need to do just to get us maybe that one step forward. That thing about exposing ourselves to our fears, even using it that way. Let's imagine that you are afraid of the water. The example I used is you're afraid of deep water. Exposing yourself might be going to the coast, just sitting in your car looking at the water. After a while, it might be walking along the shore. After a while, it might be paddling just up to your ankles, just little small tiny steps, but using your imagination as well. You know, the fear might come up, the anxiety comes up, but you imagine yourself getting back into the car after drying your feet off and putting your shoes back on. You know, just little things like that can help. It's something that has to be good. It develops, it grows, and our confidence is going to take a knock once in a while because not everything works out for us. But remember what I said about it being a journey. It's a little piece at a time and it's a day at a time. And if we pay attention, then we can look back at ourselves maybe, you know, a month ago, 6 months ago, whatever it happened to be. And we actually, if we've been paying attention to those small little goals, we realize we've come a lot further than we thought we had. So, as again, thanks everyone for joining me. And the next one is going to be in another 10 days, which means it's going to be on a Sunday again. Again, I hold this open without, if as long as I know what I'm talking about. I don't have to research too much. I will talk about, you know, different subjects that people find interesting, but I'll always suggest something anyway, just something comes to mind if I think anyone would find it helpful. So until then, thanks for watching everybody and take care.